Horizon 2020 is the European Commission's innovation scheme worth over 70 billion euros over 7 years. The project is designed to help science and innovation throughout the whole Union. But it's not only Union states that are interested in the scheme. Israel is too. But their participation comes at a price. A dispute between Israel and the EU broke out over a set of guidelines for Horizon 2020 that bans any funding to Israeli settlements within disputed territories. An argument that brought 114 MEPs out, calling for the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Catherine Ashton, not to sway to Israeli pressure. Margrethe Auken was one of those 114 MEPs.
There was a expressed fear that there might be loopholes in the agreement made between the Commission and the government in Israel. And that makes what we call a memorandum of understanding. And there, the guideline was, as far as we could hear, not really mentioned. And what we feared was that there was a loophole here, that they couldn't really implement the guidelines if they were not specifically mentioned. And of course, we need all of us to make sure that this money, our taxpayers' money, are not spent within illegal entities, which means that they should not be spent in anything related to the settlements. That should be clear.
And that now seems to be the case, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have conceded to a compromise to secure EU scientific funding, a compromise that Catherine Ashton is keen to keep secure.
As part of this agreement, EU and Israel have agreed on the money traceability and ring fencing to make sure that none of the loans actually end up in the settlements. And this is one of the instruments that we didn't have before, we now have, to make sure that we are really able to implement it along the lines that we wanted.
So there are no loopholes here?
We believe that there are no loopholes here.
But the political standoff hasn't left Israel's disputed settlements entirely in the cold, according to the director of the EU Affairs for B'nai B'rith International, Nuno Wahun Martins.
What Israel cannot accept is to have the EU guidelines being imposed on their own government and on their own citizens. Because as the word says, guideline is not a directive. On the other hand, Israel cannot distinguish between good taxpayers and bad taxpayers. Anyone living beyond the 67 lines or before the 67 lines is entitled to apply to a specific program on the Horizon 2020. Now, this is very good for Israel because this is not a technical issue, this was a political issue. And I think Israel won in this question.
Israeli settlements in disputed territories has always been somewhat of a sensitive subject here in Brussels, and Israel hasn't exactly been happy with the way that the negotiations for Horizon 2020 have been going on. But one thing is for certain, as long as all parties are agreed, the united world of science will definitely benefit at the end of the day. This is Bjarke Smith-Meyer for JN1 at the European Commission in Brussels.